The fact is, we know that it's a surveillance balloon. It's violated U.S. airspace. It's violated international
All right,
law.
we've got a live look at what we believe is the Chinese surveillance balloon now over Cape Girardeau, Missouri. We're tracking it live. So I want to bring in our panel to talk about this. Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner. Real Clear Politics, White House correspondent Philip Wegman. Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist and chief national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin coming back to join us as well. Okay, this thing captured our attention last night. We were slowly learning more and more information. But Byron, you heard the members of Congress there say many of them had no idea what was going on. They weren't briefed. They want to know when the Pentagon, when the administration knew about this thing.
That's the big thing. They're totally in the dark about this. This is an embarrassment. They don't know what is going on. They do believe that the balloon has been over parts of the United States that are totally unpopulated in Alaska. Steve Daines, the senator from Montana, said, "Have you been to Montana? A lot of it's really empty." Beautiful, but really empty. So John Tester, the other senator from Montana, asking questions about this, and the administration looks kind of silly in this whole thing, and it's actually a very serious matter.
It is, and Jennifer, you can speak to this about the questions about why or why not there were conversations about potentially taking it down by our own efforts.
Well, it's interesting, Shannon. We've been told that the debris field, if you were to shoot this out of the sky, this is 2 to 3 school buses large with heavy equipment hanging underneath it. That's the payload. And if it were shot down, and remember, F-22 jets were scrambled from Nellis Air Force Base if the president took that decision to shoot it down. So they were making preparations. But the debris field would be about 400 square miles, 20 miles by 20 miles. And that once that was explained to the president, the military advice was that they could not mitigate and avoid potential civilian casualties. So that's why they decided they were going to watch this, follow it. They took steps to prevent it from being able to get sensitive intelligence from some of the sites that it was passing over. All that started happening on January 28th when it first crossed into Alaska. Shannon.
Okay, so with that in mind, this is what China told us, Leslie, this morning about it. It says it's a civilian airship used for research, mainly meteorological purposes. Affected by the westerlies and with limited self-steering capability, the airship deviated far from its planned course. I don't know if that means like from one continent to another, but they said far. The Chinese side regrets the unintended entry of the airship into U.S. airspace due to force majeure, which would be something beyond their control. This administration's not buying it.
Well, I don't buy it either. I don't think most of the American people of the world buy, most of what China says, except for some of its, people have been brainwashed by its communist regime. But when it comes to the president and what he decided, he doesn't do this alone. He doesn't live in a vacuum in the Oval Office, and he shouldn't. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. The reason that we have the greatest military minds in the world, the greatest military in the world, the Pentagon, our defense secretary, is to advise the president accordingly. And at one point, they were going to shoot this down, and then they made the decision not to. The espionage specialists that I have spoken to have kind of not chuckled at this necessarily, but they said we're extremely naive to think that they're going to have a balloon that's visible to spy on us. There are much more high-tech things that are already out there, such as satellite or people that live among us in our country. And lastly, we do this too. We do this too. Espionage is something that countries, although it is serious and people, poo-poo it, there's a reason diplomats only get kicked out when they're accused of spying. Countries do this on each other all the time.
Well, and this gets to Secretary Blinken then, because, Philip, there's this conversation about whether he should cancel a visit or not. He is. It's called postponed for now, but there's a split out there. You've got Senator Tom Cotton saying things like, cancel the trip right now, but you've got former Vice President Pence saying, no, go look them in the eye and say, we won't tolerate this.
Well, I think what the administration is communicating right now is that they want to be prudent about the situation. Certainly, there are a lot of facts in the air, not on the ground here, with something that large. But they've communicated to the CCP that they're not happy about this. Secretary Blinken, he postponed that trip indefinitely. And the White House certainly hears the frustration, not just from Republicans, but also from Defense Chairman Tester. And if you talk to some of these Republicans, it's clear that they're not going to be happy until this balloon is in a fiery, a fiery explosion from a Sidewinder.
Well, we'll see, because we're now getting reports that there are private pilots, corporate pilots, who are able to see this thing within thousands of feet of where they are. We've been told it does have some control. You can change altitude, but there are weather situations that are going to control this a bit. But I got to think for the administration, they'd rather be talking about this, as tough of a story as it is, than they would the Hunter Biden laptop, which is the other thing that has been getting all the headlines here in Washington. I want to put up something from a Wall Street Journal op-ed today. Hunter Biden claims his laptop. It says, how's it going to look if, at the demand of the president's son, the Justice Department unleashes the full force of the federal government on the people who exposed Hunter's problematic foreign dealings, including documents that raise questions about Joe Biden's knowledge of those affairs? And Leslie, this is discussing letters that went out from Hunter Biden's legal team this week to federal and state prosecutors saying, hey, we want you to go after the people who used this information, which may or may not be accurate information and belong to Hunter.
Yeah, that they haven't ruled out shooting it down, and it's going to leave.
There's a couple of things here that are problematic, and I know there are people out there that hate Hunter Biden just because his last name's Biden, and certainly Republicans that don't want the balloon. They want to talk about Hunter Biden, and obviously there are going to be investigations that would matter for as many years as they're in power, despite the taxpayers not really wanting that, not what they elected them to do. The problem here is that there are personal items on this computer. And one of the things that I, as an American, am concerned about is now I'm certainly not related to a president, but if I drop my laptop off to get it fixed and, I have, say I'm having an affair and I have personal love letters on there.
But you sign a deal and you never come back to get it after they've told you several times, like, we've got your computer, come get it. And Byron, they're going to have a hearing this week.
Yeah, and there was a debate inside the Hunter Biden defense circle. They knew Republicans were coming into office. They knew this was going to happen. The debate was, should we try to low-key this whole thing and say, look, Hunter Biden is a private citizen. He's not a public official. He shouldn't really be subject to this kind of investigation. Or should we come out guns blazing and go after the Republicans? Well, those are the guys who won. But I think what we might see, if he's trying to take action, is that he's something called a defamation-proof plaintiff. His reputation is already so bad you can't really defame him.
Well, and that's a question, though, Philip, along with everything else, is the White House has deferred on this for a couple of years, but now there are potential threats of legal action. He could have filed a civil lawsuit a long time ago.
Certainly, and no one would disparage the president's son as a private citizen taking legal recourse here. But what I find so interesting is that we've been hearing for months that Hunter Biden's team was going to be more aggressive. I think that they might have made some missteps along the way, because at first they said, well, the data was taken improperly, and immediately afterwards they said that they were not commenting on whether or not the laptop itself was real. To Byron's point, this is a news hook for congressional Republicans who are going to want to get to the bottom of this and keep it in the news as long as possible.
Okay, we're going to get back to you. More panel information coming up.
For the past 2 years, we've heard a chorus of critics write off my economic plan. Well, today's data makes crystal clear what I've always known in my gut. These critics and cynics are wrong.
We saw an uptick in the participation rate in jobs this month, which was good to see. We saw the low unemployment, the lowest unemployment rate since May 1970. We've seen the black unemployment second lowest on record.
All right, we are back with our panel, and great news for the White House and the country on the economy today. Philip, I want to throw this up and get your comment. 517,000 jobs in January. The unemployment rate down to 3.4. Great positioning right before the State of the Union.
And if you were wondering whether or not President Biden was tempted to shoot down this balloon, he absolutely was, because he wants to talk about those jobs numbers. I think that what we're going to see is that he's going to get a second bite at the apple during the State of the Union, and he's really going to plug those numbers. And I think he's going to push back against some of the naysayers on the economic front.
Yeah, for now, though, our Fox News polling shows us that people aren't feeling it yet. They still are very upset about the economy, and they do blame this White House.
They're going to feel it. I mean, things are moving in the right direction when you have the top economist at Moody's that is saying, put the brakes on that recession talk. I really don't think it's going to be as inevitable. And a lot of people are also saying that the Feds, even though it may be 2 or 3 months, may not be continuing to hike, past that, the interest rates. This is, like you said in your open, Shannon, this is good news for the American people.
Yeah, but Byron, we still see large-scale layoffs beyond now just the tech sector. And there's this strange thing about the labor participation rate as well.
There is, and you know, it went down and it may never come fully back up. But on the other hand, when the economy improves, be happy. I mean, so the White House should not exaggerate it. Republicans should not belittle it. I have to say, it's in better shape than I thought it would have been 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's good news for all of us. Okay, let's get through your winners and losers. Byron, kick us off.
Winner, Novak Djokovic. Australian bureaucrats threw him out of the Australian Open last year. He came back and won the tournament. My loser is Ron Klain for his excessive, unseemly weeping as he left his job as White House Chief of Staff. Nobody died, so stop crying.
You know, it's funny. There was an article today about people crying on Capitol Hill, and it talked about John Boehner was very much an emotional and crier. We did see the squad upset and crying on the floor, House floor yesterday over the vote to cast Congresswoman Ilhan Omar off the House Foreign Affairs Committee. All right, your winners and losers, Leslie.
I'm going to start with losers. The people crying and saying, "Shoot it down, shoot it down, shoot it down." With absolutely, they're not defense secretaries. They don't have the military experience. And I know we like guns and shooting things in America, but you know those are my losers. And my winner would be Joe Biden, because he's not looking at the polls. He doesn't look at his approval ratings. He just keeps going ahead. And I'm sorry, but he's winning. Not just looking at the midterm election, you know, a lack of gains for Republicans, but looking at the economy and the jobs report today.
My winner this week is Speaker McCarthy, who went to the White House to ostensibly begin negotiations on the debt ceiling when the White House says that they're not going to negotiate on the debt ceiling. But more than that, he has his McCarthy mutineers, people who kept him from picking up the gavel until after 15 rounds of ballots. He has them marching in lockstep with him currently. We'll see if that lasts. My loser here is the journalist who did not cast enough of a skeptical eye on Hamilton 68 and some of the misinformation that came from that project.
All right, panel, you are fantastic.